Welcome to Fear Spiral. They said the house was too old to remember, an empty shell of wood and plaster, waiting for a new life. But when I first stepped over the threshold of 48 Willow Lane, I felt it. A deep, unsettling feeling that this house hadn't forgotten a thing, and worse, that somehow, it was remembering me. It was a classic craftsman, nestled on the quiet outskirts of an Oregon town. You know the type, a charmingly slanted roof, sprawling porch, and inside, dusty oak floors that creaked with every step. There was a faint, persistent smell of wet plaster and something else. Something like old paper and dried leaves. I got it for a steal, a real bargain. My plan was simple: fix it up, flip it, and move on. A quick, clean profit. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first night was a chaotic mess of cardboard boxes and packing tape. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the house settled into a different kind of quiet, a heavy silence. That's when I heard it. It was soft, so soft I almost missed it. A steady, rhythmic sound. It wasn't the groan of old pipes or the whistle of wind through a loose window frame. No, this was different. This sounded organic. It sounded like breathing. I froze, box cutter still in my hand. I strained to listen, my own breath held tight in my chest. The sound was coming from inside the walls. I crept over to the living room wall, the one that separated it from the old dining area. The floral wallpaper was peeling at the corners, revealing the cracked plaster underneath. Hesitantly, I pressed my ear against it, and there it was, unmistakable. A faint, slow inhale, and a long, quiet exhale, like someone was peacefully asleep, just on the other side of the plaster. My logical brain kicked in immediately. It's an old house, Maya, I told myself. It's just the insulation settling, airflow in the cavities, a draft. I repeated these rational explanations like a mantra until the sheer exhaustion of the move won out, and I finally fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the grimy windows, chasing away the shadows and my nighttime fears. Everything felt normal, mundane. I was making coffee when a glint on that same living room wall caught my eye. I walked over, expecting a trick of the light. It wasn't there. Smudged into the thin layer of dust covering the wallpaper were fingerprints. Tiny, perfectly formed fingerprints. Far too small to be mine. Far too small for any adult. And they were fresh, clear, as if someone had pressed their little hand against the wall just moments ago. My heart hammered against my ribs. The breathing, the fingerprints. This wasn't just an old house. Something was here. Something was awake. The idea of flipping it, of making a quick buck, evaporated like morning mist. A cold dread began to seep into my bones. A dread that told me I hadn't just bought a house. I had inherited a secret, and the price of that secret was going to be far, far higher than I ever could have imagined. I was no longer just a renovator, I was an intruder, and the house, along with whatever was breathing inside its walls, was starting to take notice. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind now sounded like a warning that I was not welcome here, a warning to get out. But a darker, more terrifying thought began to form in my mind. What if it wouldn't let me leave? Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, certain you weren't alone? For Maya, this wasn't just a feeling, it was a terrifying new reality. It all started a week after she moved into the old house on Elm Street, the one with the gnarled oak tree in the front yard that looked like a skeletal hand reaching for the sky. The first few nights were peaceful, filled with the usual creaks and groans of a house settling. But then came the breathing. It was faint at first, like the wind sighing through a keyhole. Maya would sit up in bed, heart hammering against her ribs, straining to hear. But as soon as she was fully awake, it would stop. It's just the old pipes, she'd tell herself, pulling the covers up to her chin, or maybe a draft. She wanted to believe it, she really did, but a deep, primal part of her knew better. Then came the night she couldn't dismiss. The clock on her bedside table glowed to 11 a.m. when the breathing started again. This time, it was different. Slower, deeper. It wasn't the sound of wind or pipes. It was the deliberate, rhythmic sound of lungs filling and emptying. And then, softly, a hum. It was a child's lullaby, a simple, haunting melody that seemed to drift from the walls themselves. Maya squeezed her eyes shut, her knuckles white as she gripped the sheets. "It's just the pipes," she whispered into the darkness, the words a desperate prayer. "It's just the pipes." But the humming grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was vibrating inside her own chest. It was no longer coming from the walls, but from right there in the room with her. She could almost feel it behind her pillow, a low thrum against her skull. Her breath caught in her throat. She was too scared to move, too scared to even open her eyes. Then came the whisper. It was a cold puff of air right next to her ear, a voice as dry as autumn leaves. "You're in my room." Ice flooded Maya's veins. She froze, every muscle in her body locking up in pure, unadulterated terror. The air in the room dropped, becoming so cold she could see her own breath misting in the faint moonlight filtering through the window. The presence felt immense, ancient, and deeply possessive. She didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. She lay there, a statue carved from fear, listening to the silence that was now somehow heavier and more menacing than the sounds had been. She didn't move a single inch until the first rays of morning sun finally pierced the gloom, chasing away the cold and the suffocating feeling of being watched. But she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the night would come again, and she was not welcome here. The next day, Maya tried to rationalize. She was sleep-deprived, stressed from the move. Her mind was playing tricks on her. She spent the day defiantly making the house her own, unpacking boxes, hanging pictures, and even humming her own cheerful tunes to fill the silence. But as dusk began to settle, a familiar sense of dread crept back in. That night, she left a light on in the hallway and put on a podcast, desperate for any noise to drown out the silence. But around 2 a.m., the podcast suddenly cut out. The hallway light flickered and died, and the humming began. This time, it was accompanied by a soft, rhythmic thudding sound. Thud, 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 like a small ball being bounced against the floorboards in the hallway just outside her door. Slowly, agonizingly, she turned her head. In the sliver of space under her bedroom door, she saw a shadow. It was small, the shape of a child, and it was rocking back and forth in time with the humming. Maya's mind screamed at her to run, to get out, but her body wouldn't obey. The doorknob began to jiggle, slowly at first, then more violently. A tiny, plaintive voice whispered from the other side, "Let me in. It's cold out here." Maya knew she had to leave. She had to get out of that house before she became just another one of its ghost stories. But as the doorknob finally clicked open, she had a sinking feeling it was already too late. The knocking started again that night, louder this time, more insistent. It felt like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the chilling silence of the old house. I pulled the covers over my head, but the sound seemed to seep through the fabric, a cold, persistent whisper against my skin. It wasn't just knocking anymore. It was a rhythmic, desperate scratching, like fingernails on drywall. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for morning. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford in this house. The sun finally streamed through the dusty windows, painting stripes of light on the floor, and the sounds vanished as if they had never been. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. I knew I couldn't spend another night like this. I had to do something. I found an old phone number in a drawer, scribbled on a faded business card. The next day I called a contractor, a man named Mr. Grant. He was an older gentleman, his hands weathered by years of work, and he mentioned he'd worked on this very house before. I led him into the living room, the epicenter of the nightly disturbances, and pointed to the wall behind the fireplace. As I described the scratching, the knocking, the desperate sounds that haunted my nights, a strange transformation came over him. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly, pale white. His friendly demeanor evaporated, replaced by a deep-seated dread that mirrored my own. He stared at the wall, not as a structure of plaster and wood, but as if he was seeing a ghost. He turned to me, his voice barely a whisper, a tremor running through his words. "Ma'am," he said, his eyes wide and haunted, "we sealed that wall years ago." A shiver traced its way down my spine. Sealed? Why would anyone seal a wall? My mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. "Why?" I asked, my voice small, almost afraid of the answer I knew was coming. Mr. Grant hesitated, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his rough hand. He looked around the room, as if the memories were ghosts themselves, whispering from the corners. "There was an accident," he finally admitted, his gaze dropping to the floor. "A long time ago, back in '92, he spoke of a family that lived here, a happy family, until they weren't. He told me about their little girl, Emily. He described her as a bright, cheerful child with a laugh that could fill the whole house. But then, one day, the laughter stopped. The parents vanished without a trace, leaving everything behind. The police searched for weeks, but it was like they had simply ceased to exist." Mr. Grant's voice cracked as he continued. "They found her toys," he said, his eyes fixed on that sealed wall. "All her favorite dolls and blocks, they found them. Inside the wall." My breath caught in my throat. I tried to laugh it off, a nervous, high-pitched sound that sounded foreign in the tense silence. "You mean she was—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. The implication was too horrific to voice. Mr. Grant didn't need me to finish. He didn't answer my question. He didn't need to. The answer was written all over his terrified face. Without another word, he began to pack his tools, his movements stiff and hurried. He refused to even look at the wall again. He just gathered his things, muttered a barely audible apology, and left, leaving me alone in the silent house with the terrifying knowledge of what or whom I'd be just inches away. Behind the plaster, the silence he left behind was heavier, more suffocating than the nightly knocking now. I knew I wasn't just hearing things, someone was in the wall, and they wanted to get out. That night, Maya sat bolt upright in her living room, her body frozen. She was staring at the wall directly across from her couch. It wasn't just any wall. It was the one that hid Emily's room, or what used to be Emily's room. Her wine glass trembled, the crimson liquid inside sloshing against the crystal. The sound had started again. That soft, rhythmic breathing, but this time it was different, slower, deeper, and it felt so much closer, as if it were right on the other side of the plaster. She reached for the heavy-duty flashlight she now kept on the coffee table. Her own breathing was shallow, a stark contrast to the slow, deliberate sound from the wall. Clutching the flashlight, she aimed its beam at the smooth, painted surface. "Emily," she whispered, her voice barely a tremor in the suffocating silence. The moment her daughter's name left her lips, the humming stopped. The entire house fell into a profound, unnerving quiet. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on you. And then it came, 3 soft, distinct knocks. Not from the door, not from the window, but from inside the wall itself. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was so clear, so intentional. Maya's hand went limp, and the flashlight clattered to the floor, its beam rolling wildly across the room before settling on a dark corner. The shock was a cold spike in her chest. She couldn't move. She could only whisper into the darkness, her voice cracking with a desperate hope she knew was foolish. "Do you still sleep there?" For a moment, there was nothing, just a frantic pounding of her own heart. Then, a voice answered, so small and clear it could have been standing right next to her. "Not anymore." The words hung in the air, chilling her to the bone. As if in response, a hairline crack appeared on the drywall. It started small, then spiderwebbed across the surface like a dark vein opening up. A rush of cold air poured out from the fissure, an ancient, musty smell of dust and rot, but laced with something else, something sickeningly sweet, like decaying flowers. Maya screamed, a raw, guttural sound torn from her throat. She scrambled backward, stumbling over the rug, her eyes locked on the wall. It was moving. The wall was actually moving, pulsing slowly, rhythmically, as if a giant, hidden heart was beating within it. In and out, in and out. Her mind struggled to comprehend what she was seeing, the impossible reality unfolding before her. Then, from the widest part of the crack, something began to push through the crumbling plaster. A small, pale hand. It was child-sized, with delicate, slender fingers, and it was reaching for her. Maya's scream died in her throat, replaced by a choked sob. The hand flexed its fingers, beckoning her closer. It was her daughter's hand, she knew it, but it wasn't her daughter, not anymore. The entity in the wall, the thing that wore her daughter's voice and her daughter's form, was breaking through. The sweet, cloying smell intensified, filling the room, and the pulsing of the wall grew stronger, more insistent. The house was no longer just haunted, it was alive, and it was hungry. The small hand continued to reach, its movements becoming more desperate, its pale skin looking almost translucent in the dim light. Maya knew she had to run, but her feet felt like they were rooted to the floor. Her gaze trapped by the horrifying, familiar sight of that tiny hand breaking free from its plaster tomb. The next morning, the sun rose on a scene that was anything but ordinary. Mrs. Dell, while getting her newspaper, noticed something strange. Maya's car, a modest blue sedan, was still parked in the driveway. That wasn't unusual, but the driver's side door was wide open, swinging gently in the morning breeze. Even more unsettling, the keys were still in the ignition, as if she had just stepped out for a moment. Mrs. Dell's unease grew when she saw that the front door of Maya's house was also ajar. A cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. This wasn't right. After a few hesitant calls of Maya's name went unanswered, she dialed 911, her hand trembling. When the police arrived, the sense of wrongness only intensified. The house was eerily silent. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass. Groceries were half unpacked on the kitchen counter, a carton of milk sweating in the room temperature air. Her dog Leo was nowhere to be found. It was as if Maya had simply vanished into thin air mid-task. The officers conducted a thorough search, room by empty room. The bedroom was tidy, the bed made, the art studio was neat, a half-finished sketch of a forest scene resting on an easel. Then, in the living room, they found it. Lying face down on the hardwood floor was Maya's smartphone. An officer picked it up carefully. The screen was black, but it wasn't off, it was still recording audio. They played the recording back at the station, the air in the room thick with anticipation. At first, there was just the faint sound of rustling, like someone moving around a quiet room. Then, Maya's voice. It was a whisper, tight with a fear so palpable it was almost a physical presence in the room. "She's awake now," Maya breathed, her voice trembling. Then, she whispered again, her voice cracking. "She's behind me." What happened next on the recording made the officers exchange uneasy glances. There was a sharp, splitting sound, like drywall cracking and splintering under immense pressure. It was loud, violent, and utterly unnatural. Following that, through a hiss of static that seemed to crawl out of the speakers, a single word emerged. It was barely audible, a guttural, inhuman whisper that seemed to echo from somewhere deep and ancient. The word was, "Stay," and then, the recording ended. That was it. No screams, no struggle, just that one chilling word. The police were baffled. They analyzed the audio, but the strange sound and the whispered word offered no clues. Maya Collins, her dog Leo, and the entity she spoke of were gone. The house on Oakwood Lane remains empty to this day, a silent monument to an unsolvable mystery. A beautiful, sprawling Victorian house, surprisingly affordable, nestled at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street. It seemed perfect, too perfect perhaps. The first week was idyllic. They painted walls, unpacked boxes, and laughed as their daughter, Lily, explored every nook and cranny of her new kingdom. But then, the nights started to change. It began with faint whispers, like the wind sighing through old floorboards. Then came the soft, rhythmic humming. At first, they dismissed it as the house settling, the quirks of an old building, but the humming grew more distinct, seeming to emanate from inside the very walls of Lily's bedroom. One night a small, trembling voice cut through the darkness. "Mummy, Daddy." Lily stood in their doorway, her favorite stuffed bear clutched tightly to her chest. "There's a girl in my room. She wants to play, but she's sad." Her parents exchanged worried glances. They reassured her it was just a bad dream, a shadow, an overactive imagination fueled by the move. They tucked her into their bed, and the house fell silent. But this became a nightly ritual. Lily would appear, pale and wide-eyed, talking about the sad girl who hummed and whispered from the walls, asking to share her bed. The Millers grew increasingly unnerved. They couldn't sleep. The humming seemed to follow them, a low, sorrowful tune that vibrated through the house. They started hearing faint scratching sounds from within the walls of Lily's room. Desperate, they called in plumbers, electricians, even an exterminator, but no one could find a source for the noises. The tension was unbearable. The final straw came one evening when they were putting Lily to bed. As they kissed her goodnight, a clear, childlike voice, not Lily's, whispered from the corner of the room, "Don't leave me alone." They froze. In that instant, they knew they couldn't stay another night. They packed a single bag, grabbed a terrified Lily, and fled into the darkness, leaving everything else behind. They never looked back. For 2 weeks, the house stood empty, a silent monument to the Millers' terror. Then, a new for sale sign appeared on the lawn. The price was even lower this time, an unbelievable bargain. No one in the real estate office mentioned the previous owners or why they had left so abruptly. Curious buyers came and went, drawn in by the charm and the price tag. But as they tour the house, a strange thing happens. As they stand in the sunny, empty child's bedroom upstairs, some of them pause. They tilt their heads, a confused look on their faces. They swear they can hear a soft, melodic humming coming from deep inside the walls. And sometimes, just on the edge of hearing, they catch a little girl's faint, hopeful voice asking, "Can I sleep in your room tonight?" Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me out.